Well, Kenya will be in the spotlight at this year's World Economic Forum. Analysts believe it's a tough year ahead after the country was rocked by an attack on that Westgate Mall just 4 months ago. Would you believe it? Well, let's talk a little bit more about the country. I'm joined on the show by Chief Strategy Officer of the Afri Biz Group. It's Lauri Elliot. Lauri, good to have you with us.
Thank you.
And it's wonderful when you start hearing African countries being spoken about on a massive platform like WEF. So positive about Kenya.
Yes, yeah. I think, and one of the things, I'll just give a little bit of background. We actually have offices now in Kenya, very close to the Westgate Mall. And if you look at the business and the stuff that's still going on, it was almost as if it never happened. So, you know, whereas analysts often are at their desk and talking about this and this, you know, it does obviously affect the country, but when you look at the amount of activity that's going on, business is still going on. It's somewhat subdued, but it's not something that will cause them problems, you know, year upon year.
Well, a lot of people at World Economic Forum were talking about, yes, every country has its issues. Kenya is by no means different, but it was the way the government handled the situation so quickly. It shows an effective governance of the country.
Yeah, and I think, you know, when you look at it, listen, you can tell I'm from the United States. I mean, we've had mall attacks. So, you know, this is not, I mean, obviously because it was Al-Shabaab and terrorists, but, you know, in the United States, we've had mall attacks, we had the cinema attacks. So I think this is an ongoing culture shift, things that are happening, soft targets. So I don't think it's something that is so unique to Kenya. I mean, yes, because of the group that was involved and the issues, but I think that we're in a new season. Really.
When you talk about the African continent, and WEF is doing this at the moment, there are 3 countries generally which get mentioned. It's South Africa, we're very lucky to be part of this, Nigeria, and Kenya. How do you think Kenya has come along in the way that it's now being spoken about as one of these destinations for businesses to look at? Why? What's happened?
Well, I think one of the things, particularly after the 2007 or 2008 elections where there was a violence, they actually have changed their structure. They've gone through de-evolution, which means that they've no longer centralized the government. So basically now they're called counties, but they're really provinces or states. They now are like a United States of Kenya, meaning that they have their own operations, their own budgets that are distributed. So it's decentralized essentially. So that actually gives the local governments, the provincial governments, more control over issues that deal with their people. And I think that that's a good thing. I think it's still going to be a while before we see, you know, a lot of positive coming from that. But I think what that does is that gives the people more of a voice because their leaders are closer to them.
It's so tricky, some analysts have suggested, and we've been discussing the World Economic Forum in Davos for some time. It's tricky doing business with African countries simply because you mentioned you're from America. You're either Republican or Democrat. I'm not reading into the blue outfit by any means. But when you're dealing with African countries, it's not just the government, it's the tribal element within it and the way that the various factions like to think of how the country should be run. Do you think that the westernized world and Asia and Europe know how to handle Africa business?
No. I think one of the issues is that there are negatives to ethnicity, ethnic groups. It can be negative, but it can also be very positive. I think there's a lot of positive cultural things. I think one of the mistakes that we make as Westerners is that we're trying to suppress it, get rid of it, say that everything is just a transaction, you know, you just do it this way and everything's fine. And I think that the world is actually changing. I mean, it's allowing for diversity amongst, you know, many people, and I think business is going to be that way. So it's going to be more important for Westerners to really learn how to develop relationships and work across those lines and bring people together in the diversity.
Final question to you, Lauri, if we could. Where do you think the interest is going to be more focused from? We've heard Barack Obama talk about Africa. He's been here already. He's been to the rest of Africa. Do you think it's going to come from the east, or do you think it's going to come from the west? Where's that focus coming from?
I think it's everyone. It's geopolitical right now. Africa is very important, and I'm also telling this for Africa's sake. You guys need to leverage that as an asset, because basically everyone wants to be here. You have natural resources, you have the largest market, fastest growing middle class, you have a lot of positives. And so basically now you have to think strategically and say, listen, people want to come here, why?
And we're open to the business as well, aren't we?
Exactly, you're open, yes, which is great. Africa
is open for business. Lauri, thank you very much indeed for coming in. Chief Strategy Officer from Afri Biz, Lauri Elliot, joining us on eNCA. Here's your headlines.
Know more about your world.
eNCA.com